Hey, what's up? The Cabinet Vision guy here with another video podcast. I was recently asked to outline the differences between the different versions of Cabinet Vision, such as Essential, Standard, Advanced, and Ultimate. So that's what we're going to be going over in this and possibly the next couple of podcasts. In this podcast, I want to go over Cabinet Vision Essential and Standard. As you can see, I've already changed my authorization codes so that I only have Cabinet Vision Ultimate. The first thing I'm going to do then is switch my codes over to Cabinet Vision Solid Essential. Because I have so many authorization codes to keep straight, I created a launching utility that allows me to handle this. Make my life a little bit easier. So I need to close out Cabinet Vision and then go to my Start menu. I can then click on my CV Launcher icon and it will display all of my available codes to me. Again, I made this myself. It's not something that Planet puts out. So let me go ahead and select my V8 codes and launch Cabinet Vision. You can immediately see that I now have Solid Essential running. This is the entry level of Cabinet Vision and allows you only the most basic of functions. We'll start this off by opening the part catalog. This catalog allows me to look at all of the parts that are used in Cabinet Vision. You can see that I can look at the different grouping of the parts, as well as filter out all parts that are included in specific part classes. I also have the ability to rename my parts. So let's try that. I'll rename exterior banding to outside banding, just as an example. This allows me to have parts that will show up in my reports exactly as I want them to. And that's really nice because, as far as I know, nobody calls all of the same parts the same thing. These two columns here allow me to specify the type of finish that the part has, exterior or interior, and we'll get to what that means in a little bit. And finally, we have the name column. This is a fixed value that we can't change as it deals with the internals of the Cabinet Vision program. And that's pretty much the part catalog. So let's close out of this and check out the material catalog now. The material catalog is where I can go to look at and edit the materials that I will use inside of Cabinet Vision. It's broken out into multiple tabs. Each tab represents a different type of material, like panel stock, board stock, laminates, and so on. We have certain properties that we can assign to the different material types, such as the name of the material, a description, a vendor that we purchased the material from, whether or not we want this material to be in our bids, a cost for the material, as well as an estimated amount of waste that the material will produce during manufacturing, and a unit type that represents how we measure the materials out. Now, I didn't mention the thickness and sheet size though. This is because not all materials get a sheet size and a thickness. Let's move over to the board stock to check this out. We can see that I do have a thickness, but instead of a sheet size, I have a rough thickness property. This is because it's using a board unit. Each unit type will have a different measurement property. Now, we also have the ability to specify textures and finish colors as well as finish types to the materials. This is for renderings and for the S2M center, which I don't have on right now, but I will mention it. If a material has the same texture on the face and back, then the face up-down placement on the nest or saw doesn't matter. Change the face and back textures to be different, and the S2M Center will notice that and take the appropriate steps to make sure that the parts are oriented properly. Just a little really important note. Now, in Essential, we can't add any new materials. We can only edit the ones that are already there. We can, however, set up things like sheet sizes, finishes, finish types, and more. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth with the material catalog. For that, I would recommend you take a look at the help files so you can get the best understanding of how to use this catalog properly. Moving down along the line, we have the material schedules to look at. Again, I'm not going to go in depth with these as there is a whole bunch to cover here, but I will go over it briefly. So, what is a material schedule? Think of it as a link between the parts and the materials that you can assign to those parts. Each schedule outlines a different set of materials to specific parts. As you can see, we have schedules for assembly parts, doors, drawer fronts, drawer boxes, rollouts, countertops, hinges, pulls, drawer guides, and even rooms. Each schedule will only list a certain class of parts. Let's open the assembly parts schedule to see what I mean. So we can see that I have a list here that I can expand the list items out. The main parent is the assembly. Then I have banding, case, face, and toe. Each of the items has a material assigned to it, with the exception of the banding. These are categories. I can assign a default material to the category, which all of the child objects below the category will follow, unless of course we specifically call them out as different material. At a glance I can see that my case and toe parts aren't all using the same material as the parent category. How did I know this though? Well, these little icons here tell me that. Just like it tells me in the legend down here, if all parts in the category are using the same material, I will have a blue icon, while red denotes that I have at least one part with a unique material. Let's expand out the banding category so we can see some parts. Now I can see that we have 2 parts in this list, each with an alder veneer edge banding material assigned to it. Let's collapse this and expand out some other categories to look at them. You can see that I have subcategories and finally some parts. If I want to assign a material to the parts, I can either double-click on the part and pick a material. I can select the part in the list and click the Select Material button. And finally, I can right-click on the part and select one of the commands available here. Select Material would allow me to, well, select the material. Match Parents Material allows me to set the material for this part to be the same as the category, and I can even change a material for this part in more than one material schedule at a time. Now, each schedule type is going to have different options, so once again, if you want to know more about each one, please take a look at your help files to see how they all work. For now, let's move on to the door catalog. This is where we make the doors that we use inside of Cabinet Vision. You can see that mine opened up with the vertical split raised panel door selected. I have a preview window that allows me to see an example of the finished product, and I have several options here that I can edit, such as the name of the door, what category it's placed in, and any specific notes that I want attached to the door. The costing allows me to specify a cost per door as well as a cost per square foot. The per square foot is obviously calculated off of the area of the finished size of the door. The material and profile information can be selected and changed, but they aren't actually set here. They are read-only, meaning that changing those doesn't actually change the materials the door is made out of or the profiles that the door uses, but rather lets us set it for sampling. Next we can click on the Construction tab to actually go through the process of creating the door. You can see that it starts off with one of my panels selected. Just like in the General Info tab, I can specify some sample profiles. And now I can also specify a sample size. This won't affect how the door is created in Cabinet Vision, but rather allows me to work with a door of the estimated door size that I expect to use. Hopefully that was clear. Anyways, now I can set details about the panel, like its width, its height, how much the panel is supposed to inset inside of the stiles, as well as how much the panel insets into the rails. Now why is my height grayed out though? That's because it's a full height panel, going from the bottom rail to the top rail, so I can't change anything about that. If I split the panel with a mid rail, then select the panel again, I can now see that I can change the height of the panel. The panel positions Y becomes available as well. This is pretty much just another way to change the height of the panel. Finally, we can lock the width and height of the panel, in case we want to have a panel that stays the same size and the neighboring panel should grow as the door size grows. We can also select the stiles and rails to change certain properties about them as well. If we move on to the Profiles tab, you'll see that it allows us to select the profiles that this door will have available to it. Place a check mark in the profile, and it will be an option that you can select from when you select the door in Cabinet Vision. We even have the ability to specify any additional cost that this profile will add to the door, and even which edges of the door we want the outside edge profiles to be applied to. The Material tab is very similar to the Profile tab, in that we can select the materials that the door can be made out of, as well as additional pricing information. On top of those tabs, we have the Setup menu, which allows us to set up certain things in the door catalog. Construction settings allows me to set defaults to the door, as well as mortise and tenon values and slat values. Matrix pricing allows me to create a price matrix that will price a door based on the width and height of that specific door. Profiles allows me to create the actual profiles that I can select for the door on the Profiles tab, while Materials will open the door material schedule for me to create, edit, and remove material schedules for the doors, which I can then select from the Material tab. Door Categories is a command that allows me to set up how the catalog is organized, and Regenerate Door Icons allows me to create the preview icons for the doors when I select them. This is only needed if the icons are missing, as the door catalog will create them normally. The File menu allows us to either open another door catalog or exit the current one. Now, a note, Cabinet Vision can normally only use one door catalog at a time, with a few exceptions, so I don't recommend making any other door catalogs. Now let's exit out of this so that we can start to take a look at the construction group in the ribbon bar. So now we have the assembly editor open. This utility is what you would use to set up how your cabinet objects are built inside of Cabinet Vision. Here we can select a construction method, and these tools allow us to create new, copy, rename, delete, and change the construction's information. This is the type of construction that this is. As you can see, I have a frameless construction type, and we can, however, change this to another type if we want, called face frame. Changing this will change what options we can set in the construction method, so it's important to use the correct type. This list contains the parts that we set up to define the construction method itself. They, like the part catalog and material schedules, are broken down into categories. If we expand out a category, we can see the parts available to us. We can either double-click on a part, or we can select a part and click the Edit Part command, and of course, we can just right-click on the part and select Run Wizard. Any of those options will allow us to run through the various options for the specific part, so that we can define how the part is made in various scenarios. If I right-click on the part again, we can see that we have the ability to create subparts. That works, subparts. So we can create various subparts for the different types of cabinets that we can specify in Cabinet Vision. Each time we create one of these subparts, Cabinet Vision will fill out all the options for that part, just like the parent was filled out, so that we can go in and easily just change the options that need to be changed for that subpart. I won't be running through all the parts and the categories, as there are a whole lot here. I'm also not going to worry about the drawer rollout construction methods, as they are identical to the assembly methods, with the exception that they are for the drawer boxes and rollouts instead of the assemblies. Now let me move on to the Utilities tab of the ribbon bar. You can see that I have the ability to enter my authorization codes here, and I have a Setup Package and Backup utility. I went over using the Setup Package utility in my Thanks Hayfula video, so I won't go over that here, since importing packages doesn't really change in this version of Cabinet Vision. Now we could create a new job to look at, but what I think I'd rather do is break from Essential here and move over to Standard. That way we can see what differences there are in the two modules up to this point. So, now that I have the Standard version open, let's look at the changes we have so far. If I open the part catalog, not much seems to have changed, except for these two buttons here at the bottom of the screen. Starting with Standard, we can add custom parts and delete custom parts. So we just select the part class we want the custom part to be added to, which is actually very important, as this will determine what material schedule it will be located in, and from there we just go ahead and click the Add button. Now we can either give it a name or select a banding name from the list. When you name your part, don't give it something too complex, because the name we give here isn't the name as you would want it to show on the reports. Remember, this column here, this is the name, so something short and easy to remember would be good. I don't want to add any parts right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel and try to delete a part. Always remember, we can only delete custom parts. You can see that Cabinet Vision isn't letting me delete the right style part. Since this check is here, don't be afraid to play around and see what you can do in this catalog. But remember to make backups. Always make backups. Since that's it in this catalog, let's move on to the material catalog. Just like with our part catalog, we don't see much new here. In fact, the only way to tell that there's anything new is to open the material menu. With Essential, this would only allow us to exit the catalog, but we can see that I can now create a new material. Notice a theme yet? The bulk of the added features of Standard over Essential is that we can add custom items where we couldn't before. So if we create a material, it will make a new material in the tab that is selected. In this instance, it's a new panel stock material. We can delete the material by just making sure that the material is selected, going back to the material menu and selecting delete. Copy would let us copy the selected material, which can be nice when you have a material that you need to make that only needs a slight change to it, say something like thickness. Here's a warning for this though. You can delete any material that's selected. It doesn't matter what it is, so be a little more careful here as you can't undo deletes. If you try to delete a material that is set in a material schedule though, Cabinet Vision will warn you and allow you to select a different material for that part. Moving on, we see a new catalog that we didn't even have in Essential, the Profile Catalog. Just so you know, I'm skipping the material schedules and door catalogs because nothing has changed between the Essential and Standard version. This Profile Catalog is what we use to handle our profiles or moldings inside of Cabinet Vision. After we move back to Essential, you'll see that we could select profiles for a job, but we could only use the ones that were provided. So here, we can create new profiles, delete existing profiles, and even give custom shapes for these profiles. Just like before, if you want more information on this, please take a look at your help files. Finally, let's go over the changes in the assembly construction methods. Basically, the only real changes here are the ability to specify two new construction types, 32mm and frame overlay. This may not seem like much, but this is actually pretty huge, as each construction type supports totally different construction options. To list out the differences would, honestly, take too long to cover, so once again, as you guessed it, you would take a look at your help files to check out the differences between all of the construction types. Since we didn't worry about the drawer and rollout construction methods in Essential, we won't worry about them now, as they also didn't change. So let's go ahead and switch back over to Essential and see about creating a new job. So creating a new job is as easy as clicking on the New Job button here in the Quick Access toolbar. Now we just go through the settings that we want for this specific job. We first select the various settings group, such as Job, Room, Cabinet, and so on. Next we look at the various tabs available to us. Each tab will further group the properties of this job for us. I'm just going to go over the properties in brief, so we have a basic understanding of them. The job group lets us define information about the job itself, such as a job number, job description, purchase order number, and customer information. We can also create comments for the job as well as define the job schedule, which is a time schedule for when certain parts of this job have to be completed. Next, we have the room group. Here we define the starting room information like the name, the type, the description, and the room material schedule. We can also select the finishes that will be used in this room and specify some of the layout defaults that we will use. A note, vertical placement is a custom value that you can specify which deals with how certain cabinet objects are placed on a wall. I'll give more information on this later. And finally, we can create some notes about this room. Most of the settings we set here are the defaults, the most commonly used values we want, as we can actually change each room's values inside of the job. Next, we have the cabinet group, which allows us to select a cabinet construction method, drawer box construction method, and a rollout construction method. Next, we can define the materials for the various parts of the cabinets, as well as hardware material schedules. We can also select the various doors that we can use in the job. The Layout tab allows us to define the basic settings for cabinet sizes as well. The countertop group allows us to select the materials that the countertops are made of. Now, before I go any further, we have seen this Modify for this job button. This allows me to make modifications to the material schedules or construction methods for this specific job. In case this job has some specifics that don't really differ too much from the norm, but can't actually use the norm. We can also select the edge profile that the countertop will use, and finally the basic layout options. Last but not least, we have the molding group, in which we can select the material schedule for the profiles and select the specific profiles for each molding type. Once I set everything up to my liking, which the defaults work for my purposes, we can just click OK to create the job. Now that we're in a job, let's go ahead and draw a simple wall and place a cabinet on it. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you can see that I have a much smaller list of cabinet libraries to choose from. This is because I don't have the closet add-on, and we're using Cabinet Vision Essential. So I can grab a cabinet and place it. Now, there are a whole lot of things I could cover here, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to cover what I think is the biggest difference between Essential and Standard. Now, I can go to the assembly view, and I can select the various sections and set any properties for those sections. But the big thing is when I go to the orthographic viewports. You can see that there isn't much to do here. I can select a part, and I can change a few things here. I can even right-click on the part to set up other certain specific properties for that part. Now let's see what I can do here with Standard though. So let's draw another wall and place a cabinet, and finally go to the section view. Since Cabinet Vision remembers the last tab I was on, it brought us to the orthographic viewport, and I can see these three buttons now: Edit Shape, New Part, and New Molding. Again, we can see adding new things is the big difference between Essential and Standard. Now, that was a fair bit to cover. There are a few other differences, like the fact that you can use stock catalogs in Standard where Essential can't. And also the ability to edit parts is added into Standard, and there's even a lot more. So we can see that the core functionality of Cabinet Vision is there within the baseline product, Cabinet Vision Essential. And as we progress through the different versions, we get more and more functionality. I haven't fully decided yet, but I will either do a comparison of Advanced and Ultimate in the next video, or just a video on Advanced and then a follow-up about Ultimate. There is actually that many things in both of those versions of Cabinet Vision. As always, I'd like to thank the Hayfla Company for their continued support, and I'm going to end this with yet another quote from one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Arthur C. Clarke.